Hello everyone, my name is Jennifer Hancock. I'm the author of The Bully Vaccine, and this is integrating behavioral psychology into reactive strategies to end bullying. And I live in Florida. I have an online learning company called Humanist Learning Systems, and the big thing that I teach is how to use behavioral psychology techniques known as operant conditioning to eliminate unwanted behaviors, such as bullying and harassment. I do use an explicitly behavioral lens, and I understand there's a variety of different scientific lenses to view the problem of bullying through, and all of these different scientific lenses yield different insights, and that's very valuable. I just come at it from a behavioral lens. And the reason for that is if we want to change behavior, we do need to use a behavioral lens. So when we're talking about creating reactive strategies, behavioral lens, we're talking about changing behavior, we need to start talking about behavioral psychology and behavioral science. That's me. I used to train dolphins in college. I went to the University of Hawaii at Manoa. I was apprenticed in operant conditioning techniques. That's a dolphin named Hiapo. And for animal trainers, behavioral psychology is not just kind of book learning, right? This is an apprenticed skill that you learn. It's very, very, very practical. And all good animal trainers around the world use these techniques. One of the techniques we are taught is called extinguishing a behavior. And if we're talking about wanting to stop bullying, extinguishing bullying behavior is exactly what we want to do. And the good news about this is that there's 70 plus years of research into this, and specifically how this works to eliminate unwanted behaviors. And there are no counterexamples in the literature. If you type in extinguishing a behavior, operant conditioning, you're going to get hundreds of thousands of articles in Google Scholar, and they're all going to say the same thing. It doesn't matter if we're training a dolphin or a human or a dog or a fish or a bird. It really doesn't. Even amoebas learn and unlearn basically the same way. So we should start using this. And one of the reasons we need to start using this is because it's very clear that raising awareness of bullying and the problem of bullying isn't enough to get bullying to stop. Our goal should be to eliminate bullying. And it's nice to let people know bullying is a problem. But I teach EEO classes and for EEO officers, and I do harassment training and settlement training and things like that at my company. And what I can tell you is there is not really any evidence that asking a bully to stop or telling a bully, hey, you're causing harm, is going to make them stop. Changing behaviors doesn't work that way. You can't just say, hey, you should stop doing that because you're hurting people. In the entire history of humanity, hey, you're hurting people has never gotten a bully to go, ooh, I'm sorry. I'll stop. Now, they need a more targeted strategy. And this is a session on using behavior as a reactive strategy. Now, preventative strategies are important as well, but I'm going to tell you a little bit of a story. When I first published my book, the school counselors at my son's school asked me to reach out to the Association of School Psychologists and suggest that they start taking a behavioral elimination approach. And what I was told when I called was, we're not interested in elimination, we're interested in prevention. And this is the difference between a preventative approach and a reactive approach. And as a behavioralist, I completely understood why they would want to take a preventative approach. And that is that behavioral elimination is the hardest of all the behavioral techniques to make work. There's one way to make it work, and if you don't do it exactly right, you don't extinguish the unwanted behavior, you make that behavior worse. It's much easier to interfere with the learning at the front end and prevent bullying behavior from becoming an established pattern of behavior, because it's way easier to do. The problem is, if we only focus on prevention, then we're leaving everyone who's currently experiencing bullying to their bullies, because if you're being bullied, you need a reactive strategy that's going to work. Ideally, something that is scientifically validated to work, right? That's the goal. And this is why I think behavioral extinction as a process that we know about through science is going to be really important as we create these science-based reactive strategies, because it's science-based. All the research on how you get unwanted behaviors to stop points to one thing. That's it. So let's talk about what the science tells us works to stop unwanted behavior, and how do we create behavioral extinction in general. So the first thing you should know, if you don't remember your behavioral psychology from college that well, we're talking about the B.F. Skinner stuff and the birds, is that there are now 70 plus years of scientific research on behavioral extinction, and there are no counterexamples in the literature at all. It doesn't matter if you are studying an amoeba. It doesn't matter if you're studying a human. It doesn't matter if you're studying a dolphin. It doesn't matter what species you study. Behavioral extinction follows a very predictable pattern that occurs always. This is kind of like established science, like evolution is. This is just what's going to happen. And you ignore what's really going to happen. What the science tells us will happen at your own risk. So how do we do this? Well, the first thing is you have to remove the reward for the behavior. If a behavior is happening, if a behavior is established, it's because that behavior has been rewarded at some point in the past, possibly being rewarded currently. The standard advice that parents give kids when the kid comes to the parent and says, hey, I'm being bullied, is, oh, just ignore them and they'll go away. Well, ignore them and they'll go away is one way to remove the reward. That's what the parent's trying to say. Stop rewarding the bully. The problem is the target of the bullying might not be rewarding the bully. The reward might be coming from the bystanders. It could be coming from a teacher. It could be coming from anywhere. It could be self-rewarding, right? The target isn't necessarily in control of the reward that the bully's getting. But this is what has to happen. If you want to extinguish an unwanted behavior, you have to figure out what the reward is and remove it. And you have to do that consistently. When you remove the reward, what the science tells us is going to happen, and again, 70 years of research into this, is that when you remove the reward for an established behavior like bullying, it's going to result in a behavioral escalation. What that means is that the animal in question is going to escalate their behavior to try and get their reward back. So I'm going to show you this graph. This is what happens. And you notice it's called blowout. That's what an animal trainer calls this escalation of behavior. We call it a blowout. I think the technical term that behavioral scientists use is extinction burst. And these two metaphors are very explosive for a reason. All right, so what's happening is you've got some sort of before state level of behavior occurring, and that behavior is being rewarded probably variably, not all the time. And when you remove the reward, the animal's going to do that behavior more in an attempt to get their reward back, because this is the strategy that works to get the reward. So they're going to do it more, and they're going to keep doing it more until they get their reward back. And if you are not consistent in removing that reward through this escalation, you will reinforce the behavior again, except now your new normal is much higher than the original level of behavior was. The only way to get through to extinction on the other side of this escalation is to consistently remove the reward through the escalation until the animal in question gives up. And in this case, we're talking about humans who are bullying or harassing other people. This is it. This is how you do it. This graph. I have a friend who does whistleblower protection in the UK. He's a researcher on whistleblowers. And I looked at his data and I'm like, you do know this, what you saw, what you're seeing in your data is predicted by behavioral science. This is exactly the pattern he was seeing. And again, there's 70 years of research that tells us this is exactly the pattern you should expect to see. And we do see this. The research on bullying with kids is that it kind of starts organically in grade school. It escalates and gets worse through middle school. And then by high school, most kids start developing strategies that allow them to ignore the bully, i.e. remove the reward. They can find their own peer groups, most kids, and they're able to avoid the bullies. And that's when we start to see the behavior tail off. Now, that's a generalization. There's some kids who never learn to do this. There's kids that commit suicide because of this. And we really need to start making sure that what we're teaching kids is this, that when we tell them a strategy that is science-based, which is to remove the reward, that we tell them what's going to happen when they do that. Because if you don't tell kids, I want you to remove the reward, however you're going to phrase that, and here's what's going to happen next. Your bully is going to get worse for a while, and I need you to be consistent through that until they extinguish. And here's how I want to support you while you go through this process. But if you treat bullying as a one-off thing and don't tell them about this, they will fail. Not only will they fail, they will learn that coming to adults doesn't work. And we don't want that. The key to getting through this process, and it is a process that takes place over time, and it can get worse over time, and it's predicted to get worse over time, is the consistency. There's two ways we reinforce behaviors. One is consistent, which means it happens all the time, and one is variable. Variable reinforcement strengthens the behavior. We don't want to do that. And I realize that doing something that's going to escalate the behavior seems really counterintuitive, right? We don't want to make the situation worse. But if we're not willing to go through, if we're not willing to go through the extinction burst, we're never getting to extinction. This is just reality. So helping people understand what this process is, what is going to happen through it, helps them be consistent. We also need to make sure that the people around these kids are prepared for this and can coach them through this so that they can get to extinction, which is what everybody wants. But failure to deal realistically with the reality of behavioral extinction leads to failure, and that's not acceptable anymore. So, opportunities for research and collaboration. There are a lot of ways that things that we can collaborate on, opportunities for research. Obviously, the big question is, does the promise of using the science of behavioral extinction yield the predicted results when we do it in real life? That's the big question, right? How best should we teach the behavioral protocol known as extinguishing a behavior in the context of bullying and for different audiences? Children are going to need to learn differently than adults, and organizations and so forth. And like if you're in a school, what is the role of the teacher in this process? What is the role of the administrators? There's a variety of different audiences that need to know how to do this. And how their behavior impacts this. And I can tell you stories. The goal should be for all of us is to create validated best practices that are grounded in science. And because we're talking about extinguishing a behavior, we need to be using extinguishing a behavior science, the science behind that. And I'm, available to help. If you're interested in adding a behavioral dimension to your research or to your project, contact me. I'm happy to help with this. My website is called bullyvaccineproject.com. All the material there is free. I explain the science in detail. I obviously didn't go into detail here because of 15 minutes, right? But I have more in-depth videos that explain exactly how the extinction protocol works, how it gets applied to the problem of bullying and so forth. I also have a white paper, a 5-point plan to stop bullying in 1 generation. And that's also at the website. And that's doable. I am 100% confident that is doable. We just have to take a systems approach to make sure that all the pieces of the system, from the administrators to the teachers to the kids and the parents, are working together to extinguish the behavior and replace it with more pro-social ways of getting whatever the reward is that a bully's getting from bullying. So do contact me. I'd love to collaborate and help you out with whatever you've got going on. Thank you.